some uh, information change means they are changing, they are passing on the messages, maybe we can call it as message pass also. So the interaction between two things are going on. So in this model, we would be saying how two different things interact with each other, how the data flow between them, or how the information is being changed between those two objects or things. Okay, so mainly interaction model would describe, it would help us to understand how different elements in an object model interact with each other. We have already studied about in object modeling. We have seen how objects are being defined, how they are being represented in a pictorial form. Okay, the same thing we'll be seeing in the interaction model. But in this, what we'll see is that we'll see how different elements in the object model interact with each other. That is the main thing we'll be seeing. So we can say that object interaction model would help us describe how the different elements in an object model interact with each other. Okay, I'll give few examples also which with each other. Now we can also, as in the beginning, I said that interaction means data flow between two objects or how they are uh, interchanging the information or sharing the information with each other. Okay, so we can also say that this term, this interaction model term, can be defined as a set of exchanged messages between the objects. Okay, so in many terms, we can define it as set of exchanged messages between the objects. Now, interaction take means the communication between the various objects or the modules takes place in almost all the uh, diagrams which we have studied till now. So we can not say that in a particular model only the interaction between the various faces is taking place. Okay, so based on its behavior, based on the activity, how interaction model can be described in a better form. So they have defined it, or they have categorized it into three different models. Okay, inside interaction model we would be studying about three diagrams which would help us to understand how in a project, how in a working model, when we are designing some software, when we are working on something, how different modules are interacting, how things are being taken as an input, how they are being processed, and how the output is being generated. That all things would be clear, that views would be clear, will understand them in a better way through the interaction model. So interaction between various objects can be understood, or we can understand this in a better way, or in a uh, we can understand these things in depth with the help of other three diagrams, which are called use case diagram, sequence diagram, and activity diagram. So if you'll go through any book, if you'll be searching for the stuff related to the interaction model, you'll always see these models would be given as an answer or as an output for your search. Okay, use case is one of the form to represent interaction between various actors. Okay, now the sequence diagram also shows us the interaction between how the process is being carried forward, how it is being completed. In sequence diagram, we have already seen how the whole process has started. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, all the things would be seen in a sequence. There is a sequence for everything. Okay, so that sequence, that communication, that flow of data, that sharing of information would be seen in the sequence diagram. And in the activity diagram, we would be seeing what are the activities of the actor associated with them and how these activities help them to interact with each other and complete that particular task. Okay, so we'll be understanding these diagrams with the help of few examples. Okay, so we can say that interaction model uses use case diagram, sequence diagram, and the activity diagram. So these would be always helping us to show the interaction. These would always help us to understand the interaction between the components of a system. So they would show us interaction between the components of a system, or between the system being developed. Now, what is the purpose of drawing this interaction model? We should understand if we are studying about any of the topic, we should always understand, it should be always clear in our mind what is the reason for studying. So let's understand the purpose of interaction model. Okay, the purpose. As we know that if you remember in the software engineering, we have studied that we deal with the customer. In the first stage, we collect the data from the customer. What are his demands? What are his requirements? What actually he's looking for? So the interaction model would help us to identify the user requirement. Okay, it would help us. It would help us to identify the user requirement. It means what exactly the user who will be using our product, who will be using our software is looking for. Okay, so identifying those things and designing those things in our system, implementing them, and make them available for the customers or the users so that they can use them easily. Okay, now when we are talking about the user requirements, when we are talking means if what is the main purpose of using our software or the app which we have designed. Okay, so when we are talking about the requirements, when we are working on it, when we are collecting them, so while doing this, interaction model would help us to understand the problems which may arise, which may occur during the usage of the product. Okay, so it would help us to identify the different problems which may occur while the communication between various objects of the modules is taking place, or various phases. Okay, so in that condition, if we want to enter any data and it is not specific and not defined, and we are not able to enter it, the information correctly, or it is not assessing our data and we cannot retrieve, there may be many issues like that. Okay, so data flow, data communication, the communication between, as we are saying that interaction model would be helping us to see the communication between various objects. Okay, so it would help us to understand how the communication problems, if any communication problem occurs, how they can be identified or how they can be removed. So it would be dealing with, or it would help us to identify those problems. Okay, so it highlights the communication problems that may arise. Now, when we are in the analysis phase, when we are collecting the requirements of that project, so interaction model would help us to understand if the proposed system which we are working on, which we are about to design, the system which is being proposed, okay, would work, means after the deliver, means when it would be delivered to the customer, how would be it working? That means we can imagine, we means a dummy. This layout, this interaction model would give us a dummy layout of the proposed system, how it may look, or how the things would be processed, how everything would be going on. Okay, that would be shown in this. Okay, so it would help us to understand the proposed system. So we can say that helps to understand proposed system. Now, it would also help us to see the behavior, understand the behavior of the objects, how they are reacting, if the interaction is going on, if the data is being shared, so how they are reacting, what would be their behavior. So we would understand, we could capture, we could analyze if certain communication between various objects have occurred, so what would be their response, what would be their behavior, what would be their dynamic behavior. Okay, so it would help us to understand the dynamic behavior of the system. So we can say that it helps us to understand dynamic behavior of the system. Now, it also describes the message flow in the system. So it describes message flow in the system. So these things can be highlighted, or these things are the reason why we draw interaction model for any proposed project or any proposed system or methodology. Okay, these are the various purposes which are being fulfilled after drawing this. Now, how we should draw this? Okay, so how to draw this interaction model? We have to keep few points in mind. So it would be easy for us to understand. So how it should be drawn. Now, as the name says, interaction model is the communication or the interaction or the data flow between the objects. So first we should identify the objects which are taking part in the interaction section. Okay, means among those objects we have to identify the objects among which the data flow or message flow or the interaction is taking place. So we can say that objects taking part in the interaction. This we have to define the objects. Next, messages. Message flows among objects. So we can say that message flows among the objects. And the sequence in which the messages are flowing. The sequence in which the messages are flowing. Okay, so I'll take a very simple example of our class itself. If we have to draw an interaction model between the student and a teacher, okay, if we are talking about interaction between teacher and student. Okay, so we know that in the interaction model we take actors. Okay, I'll be defining these symbols after just now. Let's take an example. So if we have two actors, that is teacher and a student. Okay, now we have to see how the interaction between these two objects can take place. Okay, what would be the sequence as it says? Objects taking part in the interaction, message flow among the objects, and the sequence in which the message flow takes place. Okay, it's flowing. So here this can be drawn in two different manner. That is, there can be an interaction or a message flow from the teacher side where teacher may ask some question, okay, and student is answering it, okay. The same situation can be drawn like this: teacher, student, and student asks some doubt or question, and teacher answers it. Okay, so a very simple example of interaction between two objects. Okay, now it depends. which type of message flow is taking place. Okay, and we are seeing the behavior when the question is asked, the answer is being received. Okay, so these communications, these interactions are how they are taking place, how it is affecting the whole system. Okay, so that would help us to understand how our system would look like. Okay, I'll take one more example. I'll not write here question, I'll write an example. Okay, one more example will take place. You can draw. If we'll talk about an example of maybe a doctor wants to know about patient's history. Okay, what is the patient history? What all things he has been taken means what all medicines he have been taking in the past or he was dealing with if any health issues and all. Okay, so we can have two actors here. One would be doctor and one would be maybe what should be called as an maybe a nurse or a helper or maybe a receptionist or a account person who would be maintaining the data. Okay, so here how the interaction would take place, doctor would ask for, request for patient data or information. Okay, and in return will receive, will get an answer. Huh, sir? Okay, so in return he would get the patient's record. So like this, the interaction model can be made. Now, in this, we usually have actors use case as we have seen that the interaction model can be designed in three ways: use case diagram, sequence diagram, and activity diagram. Okay, so I'll start with use case diagram. Sequence diagram, activity diagram in next class. Okay, so now as we have a lab session today, so just tell me how many of you have created your account in the uh, tool, means in the websites which I have told you, and you tried something from your side. Is there anyone who tried it? Okay, I can see a few people. Okay, good. So I'll just give few more questions. Okay, so you can start using your tool, whichever is comfortable, and just start drawing them. And you can submit. I'll share the link. There is no compulsion to submit those diagrams today itself. Okay, by the next lab you can share with me, and if you have any doubt at any stage, you are free to contact me anytime and you can clear your doubts. So I'll just write the questions on the whiteboard and share the screen. You can note down them, and if you want you can stay in the lab, or if you want, you can leave. Okay, I have already recorded the attendance for you. So just note down the questions. If you are done with them, you can personally send me in the chat box in the Teams. Otherwise, in the next lab, I'll share the link. So in the link, you can submit that. Okay. You can see I have shared my screen. I have written few questions on the whiteboard. You can make state diagram based on these situation. सर मैं आ रही बस एक मिनट है ना. So just note down these questions and start drawing these diagrams.